All right, guys. So this is really interesting here. Tucker Carlson reached out to every single Republican presidential candidate and asked them pretty direct questions on the Ukraine war and basically tried to get them to clarify and get on the record as to what their exact position is. So he has their responses here. I want to listen, and then we'll come back and I'll break it down for you. Take a look.
So former President Donald Trump, who as of tonight is the front runner for the Republican nomination, sent a long and really interesting response. Russia would never have attacked Ukraine if I were president, he writes, not even a small chance. Trump says he opposes regime change in Russia. Quote, we should support regime change in the United States. That's far more important. The Biden administration are the ones who got us into this mess. Trump repeatedly refers to the risk of nuclear war, which he describes as absolutely real, and then he calls for a negotiated peace by Ukraine mediated by the United States. Quote, both sides are weary and ready to make a deal, Trump writes. The meeting should start immediately. There is no time to spare. Death and destruction must end now. Trump has been saying things like this and predicting this for 5 years now, and he's saying it again. What's interesting, though, is that Trump's former Vice President Mike Pence, who was also running for president this year, opposes his old boss on nearly every point. We're paying the Ukrainians to fight Russia, Pence writes, so we won't have to fight Russians ourselves. Pence endorses even stricter sanctions against Moscow. He dismisses the risk of nuclear war as a, quote, bullying tactic from Putin. And then Pence suggests that anyone who disagrees with his views on Ukraine is a disloyal American. Quote, there is no room for Putin apologists in the Republican Party. Mike Pence did not specify who he was talking about, though we suspect this show is included in that treasonous category. And then maybe the most newsworthy response that we received was from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. DeSantis has well-known views on many topics, of course, but until tonight, no one could really say with precision where he stood on the war in Ukraine, which is arguably the most important topic in the world. And now we know. DeSantis is adamantly opposed to the position that most Republicans in Washington have taken on Ukraine. DeSantis is not a neocon. Who knew? Quote, while the U.S. has many vital national interests, DeSantis writes, securing our borders, addressing the crisis of readiness within our military, achieving energy security and independence, and checking the economic, cultural, and military power of the Chinese Communist Party, becoming further entangled in a territorial dispute between Ukraine and Russia is not one of them. Without question, he writes, peace should be the objective. The U.S. should not provide assistance that could require the deployment of American troops or enable Ukraine to engage in offensive operations beyond its borders. F-16s and long-range missiles should therefore be off the table. These moves would risk explicitly drawing the United States into the conflict and drawing us closer to a hot war between the world's two largest nuclear powers. That risk is unacceptable. DeSantis goes on to oppose the policy of regime change in Moscow, which is very popular in Washington, and he points out that the Biden administration has created an alliance between Russia and China, and that's a disaster for the United States. Quote, we cannot prioritize intervention in an escalating foreign war over the defense of our own homeland, especially as tens of thousands of Americans are dying every year from narcotics smuggled across our open border, and our weapons arsenals, critically for our own security, are rapidly being depleted.
All right, there you have it. So that's Trump and that's DeSantis. By the way, he goes on to bring up Nikki Haley, who, of course, is more in line with Pence's neocon argument. Tim Scott, who I don't think said much, but maybe leans more in the Pence direction. And then you also had Vivek Ramaswamy, who wrote a very, very long response. And the gist of his response is babble, 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 garbage, garbage, garbage. Let's not focus over there. What we need to do is take out the real threat, which is the drug cartels, which is his not so subtle way of saying we should invade Mexico. As, by the way, a lot of Republicans have now been saying that over and over and over. Dan Crenshaw, Lindsey Graham, just to name two, but there's others who've gone on Fox News like, yeah, we should invade Mexico. So, wow. Wow on the Vivek front. But anyway, so let's get back to Trump and Pence and DeSantis here. So this is interesting both substantively, but also it's interesting in terms of the politics of the 2024 race. So the Republican base is kind of split on the issue of Ukraine. I think they still lean a little more in favor of giving them aid and giving them support, but it's certainly more mixed than on the Democratic side. It's overwhelming, support Ukraine, screw Russia. On the Republican side, a little more mixed. But Pence is taking the classic Washington neocon position of like, look, we have to stop Russia now We have to bleed out Russia now because they're not going to stop on their own. So if they take Ukraine, they're going to keep going. They're going to take whatever, fill in the blank with the other post-Soviet states that are on the list. They are afraid of a World War II type scenario where you can't appease somebody like Putin. In their mind, Putin is like Hitler. Therefore, if you make a deal with him, he's just not going to abide by the deal. He's going to keep going. He's going to keep taking places. And eventually we'll learn our lesson that there is no negotiating with terrorists effectively. That you have to take them out one way or another. And their way of doing it as of right now is basically via proxy war. Fund Ukraine, let Ukraine take care of it for you, and support them in every conceivable way imaginable. That's the Pence position. That's the more neocon position. Trump's position is effectively the polar opposite, which is, look, he's not Hitler. He's not going to keep going. Just make a deal and be done with it. We need to de-escalate because we're on the brink of World War III. We live in the nuclear age. It can't, you just can't play with stakes that are this high. You can't roll the dice. You can't risk it. If he's not bluffing, what are we talking about? The end of humanity as we know it. So we can't play that game. So just make a deal. In his mind, it'll stick if you make a deal. So make a deal. Both sides are tired of fighting anyway. We want to end the carnage. We want to end the bloodshed. We want to end the people dying right now. The two things that Trump said that I don't agree with are, he argued Russia wouldn't have attacked the U.S. if I was president. I definitely don't agree with that. They were building up to this point anyway, and they had previously done invasions under Republican and Democratic administrations. So they took Crimea when Obama was president, but they also invaded Georgia when George W. Bush was president. So it wouldn't have mattered, right? If he had won a second term, this probably still would have happened. So I don't agree with him on that front. And the other part that Trump said, which is psychotic, is, well, we need regime change in the U.S. Hey, Dick, I don't know if you know this. He probably does know this, but regime change indicates not a democratic change of power. It's like removal by force and propping up, doing a coup basically and propping up some other leader. And he probably does know exactly what this means, but you know what he did on January 6th and what he wanted to happen on January 6th and how he wanted Pence to, basically overturn the election for him. And so he probably knows exactly what he's saying and knows exactly what he's doing. And that's dark, right? And then DeSantis comes in, and honestly, he sounds like he's taking more of the Trump position than he is the Pence position, but it's actually splitting the difference. That's what's really interesting about what he said. So I jotted down a bunch of it. Tucker says he's not taking the neocon position. Quote, peace should be the objective. And then he goes on to argue, basically, we have a lot of problems here, and we need to put those front and center, but also no offensive weapons for Ukraine. Now, that's interesting. It was very clear that he meant no offensive weapons for Ukraine, but that means he's leaving the door open for defensive weapons to Ukraine. So he's actually sort of splitting the difference between the Trump position and the Biden position. And by the way, you know who else got that message? Every other establishment Republican. So since we got this answer, Chris Christie came out and went after DeSantis, called him like a Putin apologist. Lindsey Graham, same thing. Because they're definitely team Pence, team neocon. And I honestly think the reason why DeSantis is taking this position, it's strategic and it's for the 2024 primary. He wants to sort of get people who are on both sides of this, voters who are on both sides of this, to the extent that they care about it, to view him as he's the most reasonable one. Because he's not saying goofy things like, I'd end it in a day, which is obviously not something Trump could actually do. But he's also not really flirting with World War III and saying like, yeah, there's no, what's the worst that could happen? It's good. Just keep escalating. He's sort of taking that middle road. So that's interesting. That's interesting to me. And if I'm being honest with you guys, I think it's kind of smart positioning too for the 2024 primary. But it's not, here's the part he would never admit. His take is not that different from what Biden is doing, right? It's not that different. Biden has attempted, now you could agree or disagree with how well he's succeeded at this front. He's attempted to basically provide the weapons, allow the proxy war, but draw a line at the weaponry that basically can be used offensively. You know, they originally said no to, what was it, tanks and fighter jets and the longest range missiles and things like that. So, and I think that's kind of similar to the road that DeSantis would take if he's being honest in his commentary here. So it's actually not too far apart from DeSantis, which gets to my final point, which is like, I think most U.S. presidents would actually react the same in this instance. I really do. And in the case of Trump, I'd actually, in a weird way, I'd be more concerned with Trump in office because he's saying, oh, peace deal, peace deal, peace deal, which I actually agree with that. I think that's a good thing. But the problem was when Trump was president, we had Russiagate, and Russiagate was BS, and they were basically saying like Trump's a puppet of Putin and all this stuff. And so Trump felt compelled to like prove those people wrong. And so if anything, when he was president, he was very aggressive against Russia. I mean, he did the NATO buildup on Russia's border. He said no to the pipeline deal at the time. He was arming some unsavory factions in Ukraine, including the Azov battalion, like the explicitly neo-Nazi linked types. So funny enough, he was actually very hawkish on the issue of Russia when he was in power. And so I'd be afraid that he would react to the media narrative too much, because the media narrative would again be, oh, he's soft. Oh, he's a Putin puppet. Oh, he's weak. Oh, he's letting Vladimir get away with whatever the hell he wants to get away with. And I think he would overreact to that and maybe do something borderline, and then we're really in trouble. So I like his instability actually scares me more than any other potential candidate who I think would do more or less a similar thing. I think that, Biden and DeSantis and the others would kind of try to walk that line of like defensive weapons, but keep it in the defensive realm and then sort of let it play out. You know, my perspective is peace, negotiation, try to find out, just give peace a chance. Look, I could be wrong, right? That if you make a deal, he just goes back on it and keeps invading places. That's very possible. And in that case, it'd be fair to say, hey, man, that was like a Neville Chamberlain move and you got played like a bitch. Okay, maybe. But I'm on team give peace a chance, because it's possible that, look, their military is depleted. They have forced conscription. People don't want to be doing it. And it's possible that he doesn't have the ability anymore to keep going, even if he wanted to. So you got to give peace a chance. And that would mean negotiation, diplomacy, finding a way out of it that's reasonable. And we all know Boris Johnson went there and killed an attempted peace deal from early on, which is unforgivable in my opinion. So anyway, that's the breakdown. These are their positions on Ukraine. And I honestly can't wait to watch this play out in the debates. Can't wait to watch them go back and forth on this. And I think the least politically savvy here is Pence and the people who seem like they're horny for World War III. And I think the most savvy is honestly DeSantis, who's at least trying to walk the balance between the two perspectives on this. And in a sense, steel manning both sides. Like, hey, I see why you guys feel this way. I see why you guys feel this way. Let's try to find a reasonable path here. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.